Hi.
Wow, we're live.
Fancy.
Yeah.
This is Let's Talk About Dating on Going Solo Media, the #1 internet singles talk radio through the internet, TV, and podcasts. And this is Christine Baumgartner and Barry Selby. Hi, Barry.
Hi, Christine. Nice to be here. Let's have fun with another fun topic this week. We're going to definitely dive in on this one.
Oh, I think so. I think emotional intelligence has so many layers and so many misunderstandings and wrong meanings. And yeah, I think this is going to be a really deep subject with lots of layers to it for sure.
And hopefully we can warm people up to the idea that emotional intelligence is not a good thing. Is a good thing. Because a lot of people look at emotions, go, no, thank you. I'll be, stay away from it.
Yeah.
So,
or they think they shouldn't say them, or they think they should just say every single thing they're feeling all the time. And neither one of those is very helpful in the world for you or the world.
Exactly.
And because this is about dating, we'll talk about how to develop your own emotional intelligence, see where you are, if you want to develop some more, how to do it, if you have no idea what we're talking about, how to get started, and then how to tell if the other person has their emotions grown up since they were teenagers. Or sometimes, how we feel like we're 5 again when we're frustrated and hungry and tired. That's how I tell people. I said, I'm feeling very 5 right now.
That's the thing about this is we want to make sure that when you do understand that emotional intelligence is a good thing, it's also good to know when somebody else isn't there, so you know not to date them.
Yes, and to know is it a momentary thing like mine is when I haven't had enough sleep or enough to eat, or is this a chronic thing? Because wow, you can't fix it for somebody else. You can only fix it for yourself.
No. You can't fix crazy. No, what is it? There's a joke out where you can't fix something. It's like bottom line is that you start realizing emotional intelligence is one of your requirements in a relationship once you understand it, because you go, oh, now I know how powerful this is. And funny, because you're saying that temporary thing is, even when you say like you're acting like a 6-year-old and you're throwing a tantrum, you're fully aware you're doing it, which is emotional intelligence. So it's actually very helpful. That was like a fake one. You're going to go, not really being that. You're actually saying this is actually one of the secrets. You can do that, but you own it.
Well, that is certainly one of the hallmarks is, do you take responsibility when it's you doing your thing, no matter if it's a pleasant thing or an unpleasant thing? How aware are you that it's not, it's always the other person? I mean, that is such a hallmark of somebody who has not grown up their emotional intelligence at all, because everything's always other person's fault. And there's that thing where you look at the other 3 fingers that are pointing back, and it's really a lot us.
Basically, it is like if you live in the blame game, that's a clue that you're not doing the work, because it's so easy to go that it's all their fault. I'm fine. They're the ones with problems. They're the ones that made a mistake. They're the ones that screwed me up. They're the ones that made my life horrible. This is what's known as the victim journey.
Yes.
And it's not empowering. It's not intelligent. It's not emotionally freeing either, because you spend that whole time being the victim, which is not healthy.
No.
It doesn't work. So, yeah, absolutely. So blaming and being victim go hand in hand some ways, and they're not effective in this conversation.
Not at all. So we've given you a few ways to tell if your emotional intelligence is not very grown up, if it's pretty immature. Yes, it's still kind of stilted and certainly if you say, why do I keep attracting people that are mad all the time, or people who aren't responsible financially, or because that was my thing. I really started thinking about this, and I thought, oh yeah, I think that had a lot to do with the men that I dated in the beginning that I said I wouldn't marry, because they were so financially unstable, even though they had great jobs and made a lot of money, because their responsibility thought was not there about, I need to provide for his personal future. And then if he wanted to have a family, it's a responsible thing to do, which is a pretty adult thing to do. And that was just it wasn't even in their orbit.
Right.
It was so amazing.
So that's something we also preface. Emotional intelligence is not something you're usually born with.
No.
And as far as I'm aware, not many schools teach something like this. So we're talking about stuff that a lot of people have no understanding of. So first of all, when we're broaching the subject, I highly recommend that you don't start judging yourself as being bad or making mistakes for not knowing this stuff, because Chrissy and I both have had the learning along the way to become fairly good at this stuff.
Yeah.
It wasn't something we learned before we were 20
Yeah.
as kids. We had to go through our own journey. So hopefully we can save you some time by teaching what we know, and then hopefully you'll learn this yourself.
Yeah. And boy, that is so important, to not give yourself a hard time for not knowing what you couldn't have known. You couldn't have known this if nobody's brought it up to your attention. And especially if you were raised in a family where everybody blamed everybody else and there wasn't anybody ever taking responsibility. How would you have ever had an example of that? So you give yourself grace about that. And then it's, well, yuck. Maybe it is my fault. Yuck. You go through that. Oh my gosh, what kind of person is it that if it's all my fault? Well, it's never all your fault, but it just might probably be some of your fault. But once you get over that, then you can say, oh, but I can do something about this. I can do something about my immaturity in reacting to people or situations or my life, where then you can handle life in a much more mature manner, and then you stop feeling like such a victim. So that's one of the clues. If you're always feeling like the people are out to get you, or God's out to get you, or you just have all this bad luck, it might be good to look at what is it that you might be able to do differently, or think differently, or act differently. That's a very mature way of looking at it, because when you're 5, you just think that if your toy breaks, it's the toy's fault. If your parents are mad at you, it must be their fault. It's part of being a little kid. And so to grow that part up, to say, oh, what was my part in this? What was my 100%? What was my responsibility?
Frankly, all of that comes into one bucket, which is life is unfair.
Yeah.
And when we have that, if you've ever said to yourself or to somebody else, which I used to do when I was a kid, life is so unfair. It's like that shouldn't happen that way. That's all that assumptive thing that somehow we're not responsible.
Yep.
And part of emotional intelligence is to really become responsible, not to the world, not to anybody else, but responsible with your own feelings, your own experience, your own perception of what happened, so that you can actually have mastery over it. The truth about this work is that you start to learn, one, that you're not a victim to the world. Secondly, that you have some sort of power and ability within this conversation. And third, you can change it.
Yeah.
And you can actually stop being the victim, and you can actually do something to change your perspective so that your life becomes a lot more fun and joyful and fulfilling just by switching this on. So,
and another little flavor of the same thing you were talking about is the people who say, oh, it is all my fault. Everything's always my fault. I'm always responsible. I cause everybody all this heartache and headache. And oh my gosh, I'm the one that's making the world a bad place. Well, geez, you're the most powerful person I've ever met then. And what a horrible way to live. Because I think the people I know that feel that way do feel like they have some power. They don't really, though. They really aren't causing all these people generally. I mean, certainly the people can play off of each other and make each other feel worse and worse and worse. And it's just another flavor of not being very grown up in your emotional side, if you think that you're causing all these problems all the time and can't ever do anything about it. I mean, that's not very grown up at all.
No, it's not. In fact, on that term about growing up, I would almost say that another way of saying emotional intelligence is actually emotional maturity.
Mm-hmm.
There's a level of when we start to have emotional maturity, we start to become, I would say, present to and aware of our emotions versus being totally oblivious to the fact we're feeling upset.
Yeah.
That's when you become, it's like then you have a mature response, so to speak. You become a more adult response to what's happening. And it is, and that's the trouble, is most people who become adults didn't grow their emotional intelligence or emotional maturity to the level of their physical maturity.
Yes.
So there's a disparity there, which is what the problem is, and that's what we're here to fix, in a way.
Very much. Yeah, just because you got chronologically older did not mean that your emotions grew up.
No, far from
it.
For some.
And I want to say again what you said, that you're generally not taught this in your family. You're not taught this in school. So if you don't know this, welcome to the real world. You get a year older, and it doesn't mean that your emotions are now maturing, that your emotions are getting older and more grown up and feeling more in control. Because that's what it is you feel like, I have choices in how I react. I have choices in my emotion. And so now people are going to say, well, I don't want to make my feelings different than they are. You know, if I'm upset, I'm upset. So I think we need to really address that, because I can just hear all those objections happening loudly.
Indeed, indeed. And there's another piece I want to make sure people get is that in your passion, and because I think we'll frame this more, well, we'll see how it goes, but frame this more about relationship. It's also going to include family dynamics and where we're raised. And also the good news is when you do learn this, you can raise your children differently if you have kids as well. It's one of the benefits. But the second piece is recognizing that this is not to excuse people who abused you. It's not to excuse people who hurt your feelings, because this emotional intelligence is not emotional invulnerability. It's not emotional, what's the word for shielding, so to speak. This is really recognizing that our emotions are part of who we are and a part of our makeup, but we do something about it. So to feel upset because somebody really hurt you isn't abnormal, and that's not saying that you feel upset. It doesn't mean you're not emotionally intelligent. It's about what you do with it. Yes. Because again, it talks about earlier about the blame game. It's all my fault. It's always my fault. That's the thing we talked about earlier. Is what sometimes we do when we get hurt in relationships. We take it on the other person, like we're at fault, or we go and blame the other person, saying it's all their fault. I'm a victim to what they did to me. Neither one of those is actually healthy. No. It may feel good for a moment, which I don't even know that feeling. It's like let me sit in my pool of tears and be upset. It feels better for about 5 minutes.
Yeah.
But to spend weeks, months, and years in that isn't healthy.
No.
So this conversation about emotional intelligence is about how you can actually pick yourself up and wipe off of that pool of tears and step free of it.
Yes. Yes. And figuring, how do you figure out, because this is how you grow up your emotions. Mm-hmm. What's the real feeling? What happened outside that caused it outside of you, and what's it touching on the inside of you, and then sorting out what to do about it, what to say to yourself to soothe yourself, what to say to the other person to put up an appropriate boundary or make sure that it doesn't happen again, or to say, oh gosh, I mean, this is really grown up. I bet you didn't know this about me. Like the story that I've told about my late husband, and he told me about his practical jokes. And I said, oh, no, never do that to me, because it's a really hard thing for me to get over. And they never did. They really heard the warning. If I had not said that, of course, because they cared about me, and it was how they showed they cared about each other, they would have played practical jokes on me to show me that they cared, which would have felt the least caring to me. It's because I was grown up enough to say, you need to not do this because of who I am. And I wasn't finding fault, because people who haven't heard this story before, that they did that with each other. They got gleeful about it. I mean, the stories of how they got each other were legendary.
Right.
But it just couldn't happen to me because of who I am. I'm super sensitive about stuff like that. And so I express that in a very grown-up way, and they accepted it in their nice grown-up way, because because I've had people for a short time in my life who go, but that's who I am. I will just use that. I'm a practical joker. That's how I show people I care. Well, then I'm sorry. I guess we can't be friends. Because if that's the only way, I get it. Go do it to your friends who like it. But if that's the only way you can show me you're my friend, I won't feel like you're my friend. So I can't do that. So that I've had to learn, because I used to get my feelings hurt every 5 seconds when I was a kid. Oh my gosh, it was awful to walk around like that. And I vacillated between it's all them and mostly it was all me, because that's how I was taught when I was young. And to learn, no, it's not all me. What is me, and what to say about it in this scary, scary thing to have conversations with people until it wasn't scary anymore. But in the beginning, it was really scary.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny because I was thinking, reflecting back on my own, when I first got off the boat, so to speak, when I came to America, I didn't realize for a good couple of years that my way of talking to people wasn't being received. It wasn't about the English versus American languaging. It was the sarcasm. Because I grew up, and I was raised on the east side of London, which is very, very sort of working class. And sarcasm was the way we showed we cared about each other. I mean, it was not a very pretty one. But it was like the sarcasm was the same thing. It's like practical jokes on your side was like sarcasm on mine. It was always something where we would talk about stuff, and it would be normal. And when I came out to America, especially the first 6 months I was here, when I came out on the first contract, I remember vividly people looking at me going, "What did you say?" Like, they were taking it personally. I was stabbing people with words, basically, because I was being sarcastic.
Yeah.
I was totally having fun, being playful, and my smile would just lock in place because I would go, "Oh crap!" I realized what it was me. That was my first clue that maybe I need to change how I was for the society. It wasn't so much it was like I need to tell them. I was like, I need to change my languaging to be less sarcastic and more just straightforward communication, so that I don't injure people emotionally around me. So that was one of my learnings about emotional intelligence.
That is such a great story, because it is a choice of, well, this is who I am, and this is how I express, and this is my true self. And we don't ever want somebody to not be their true self. And how can you move it just a little? Just a little. Still you, still very much in the category of you. Just a little tweak, because it wasn't achieving the goal. Your sarcasm at home had achieved the goal of bonding and laughing and banter back and forth, and everybody just got more gleeful about it. Where when you found here, it was going flat. The air was going out of the balloon. And so there wasn't any connecting or engaging or humor, which is what you were going for. So that's when you say, I'm not going to change me. I'm still going to have humor. I'm still going to have a quick wit. I'm just going to change the verbiage. That's not your core, because I don't want to change my. I get that. I don't want you to change your core either, generally. But tweaking is always essential. We need to keep doing, like if you think of a sailboat, you do this course correcting all the time. Nobody ever goes straight on a sailboat or a bicycle. So I talk about, yes. So as you're readjusting and growing up and maturing and learning different ways to deal with the world, that's all it is a tiny, you're still the same boat, plane, bicycle person. You're just making these course corrects. Because, I get a lot of pushback about, because they've had people really try to change their basic humanality. And I don't want to do that. And I get the sensitivity around it for sure.
You mean humility or humanistic?
No, they're human being. Well, that too. But they're human beingness. This is who I am as a person. I mean, I have heard that more times, and I've learned to present this in this way instead. I take it out and make it a 3-dimensional bicycle, plane, boat, because then they stop getting so personal about it. But they've had so many people, like my family, they all said I talk too much, because I do. I talk a lot. I think I don't talk too much. And I learned the people that can tolerate just so much. So I don't talk as much. I pick my words. I offer people the Reader's Digest version, even though I love telling long stories. And then I know the people that are like, oh yeah, go ahead. Give me all of it. So I save up for them. So I still am me. I still am vivacious. I still use more words than a lot of people. But because I want to interact with these people that I was previously wearing out, I've adjusted me, this piece of me, but not all of me. I didn't change me. I just changed the way I was doing it, the way I was interacting with specific people if I want to have them in my life. And they have gotten good about saying, I can listen to this long of a story. I have this much time to talk. That's our agreement now with those people. I said, tell me how much time you talk and have to talk, and then we share. But it's taken a lot of adjustment, where we just assume, especially when we assume everybody's like us, which is not the truth, that you, instead of keep stepping on the other person's toe, or they keep stepping on yours, that you put on your Wonder Woman boots, because I like that better than big girl panties, and have this brave conversation. Yeah, isn't that more attractive than big girl panties? I think so.
Yes, I wouldn't wear it either, but thank you for that.
Maybe Superman boots, right?
Yeah, I'll do. No, the thing to speak to that in a sense for myself is that I still say dabble with sarcasm. I still play part of my toolkit, but I'm very clear that I don't pound it home 17 times over, which is what my old habit was, because the people aren't receiving it that way.
Yeah.
But it's funny, because I get like Clubhouse, the app I'm on a lot, quite because we have a lot of people internationally. Clubhouse is not just a local app; it's global. So a lot of times I'm in rooms, especially in the morning here on California side, people who are in Europe. And so a lot of times I'm in rooms with people from England, and I become good friends with them. But it's funny because their mindset, because it's where I come from, brings out that part of me again, because it's still in me. It's not like it's gone away. But then it becomes second play again. So it's like I keep my hand in, so to speak. I keep my practice in. But I recognize very clearly now, thankfully, because I've had enough practice with this, that I got to be really careful who I select to play that game with, because it doesn't land for everybody. And it's that respect. Part of the emotional intelligence is having respect for other people's perspective, and also where they're coming from, to know when you can do something a certain way and you can't do it with other people.
No. And it must be so fun to come across somebody who wants to do that with you.
It is like going back to my teen years, because I came here in my early 20s. So I definitely didn't spend the whole life doing that.
It's like getting a little fix.
Yeah. That's a good way of putting it.
Like, how much do I love getting invited to speak to a big group, because I get to talk for a really long time before they get to ask me questions, and then I get to answer questions. It's a really good fix for me.
For me, I take questions much earlier than you do.
I know.
Just the way I'm wired, different.
It works. We both have our method.
Indeed. And owning that is good. And being aware of it. So a lot of what we're talking about here with emotional intelligence, and a lot of pieces, really, another sort of undercover like title is self-awareness.
Yes.
And it is for us, that emotional intelligence oftentimes, and just to put a little piece in the direction we're going to go into, explaining how it works, is that for most of us, emotional intelligence is not something we become present to because we just express our emotions how we express them without thinking about it.
Yeah.
And emotional intelligence is almost being able to take a magnifying glass to our emotions, in the sense of being able to see what we're doing, notice how we're expressing, and then choosing whether we want to do that or something else.
Yes.
And just to be clear, not from a judgmental place, because that's the other part also. It's about really in a place of evaluation, going, this will land, this won't. Okay, I'll do this instead.
Yes.
So emotional intelligence is really being present to So it's not, so again, at first it may be clunky, because like all these skills we're talking about, we're always learning and growing as we do this. But the thing about this self-awareness piece, because I talked about it so many times in my work about, the first step is to become aware, because awareness often is the curative agent. So emotional intelligence starts with like noticing, oh, I notice I keep blaming other people. I notice that I keep blaming myself. I notice that I keep resenting people who speak too much or who get sarcastic. What do I need to do about that? Because that's where you can shift things.
And so often, and we've all heard this, and whether or not we believe it or not, I do, that the thing that really pokes at you, it might be something that you haven't acknowledged in yourself, or you have been working on, but you're not quite there yet. Because, think of all the things in the world that don't bother you and don't get under your skin, and it does somebody else, and you're like, well, isn't that interesting? That bothers them so much. I wonder why it bothers them so much and not me. So I like that when I go, how come it bothers me so much and not the other person? I mean, that's a pretty grown-up thing to be asking too.
Yeah, that's the word, grown up, or the phrase rather, grown up. And because again, I said emotional intelligence often can be looked at as emotional maturity. So it is raising up your emotional response to things to a more adult level, so you don't keep throwing 6-year-old tantrums all the time without thinking about it. And and to be honest, watching grown adults, especially men, because women do it too, but men, when they do it, throwing a tantrum, it's almost embarrassing to be in their company. So emotional intelligence actually is a very healthy thing to learn, because it gives you more high regard from other people too.
Yes.
So good skill to learn. That's why we're going to talk about it. And that's why we're going to get into this after the break.
Yes. We'll get into how to grow yourself up, how to do some really behind the scenes stuff to see how grown up other people are emotionally when you're getting to know them over dating. So we'll have some commercials and we'll be right back.
See you in a minute.
Bye.
back.
And we're back talking about emotional intelligence, yours and other people. And how do you make sure yours is intact and you're staying conscious of how to keep developing it? And how do you find out if the other person's is? That's a big question.
And basically all the benefits of learning this.
Oh, so many that you won't even realize, at least I didn't until I started doing this work. The benefits that came back of feeling more in control, more empowered, certainly less a victim, which was such a relief, and feeling more heard and understood, which is really important to me.
Yeah.
Growing up, those emotions inside of me of not having either of those extremes, that it was all the other person or all me, was freeing, was very freeing.
It's a massive stress reducer too. I mean, the simple thing is that when you start to recognize this freedom that you have to, in a way, step free of this, or to step to the side and watch the game. It's like when you realize you're not part of the game, you step free and watch it go past you.
Yes.
The sense of like, oh, relief.
Yeah.
And,
You're not in the middle of all the pummeling and
because let's be clear, I pretty much guarantee you that when you do this work, you're one of the few people in the room that has this skill set.
Very much.
And the advantage is like you have a secret password nobody else has.
Yeah. Well, and then you have a chance to see if there might be other people by some of the questions we'll give you to ask, and to have a chance to teach other people. I mean, you really can be by example. That's really the best way, is that if you start acting not a victim or not a persecutor, you will be a very good example for the people who are maybe ready to stop being those two things. Because that's what you are when you're emotionally immature. You're one or the other of those.
Yeah. In fact, I talked to another, I'm sure I said it other times in the show, that I was bullied in high school. And if I had this skill when I was a teenager, be holding me experience. I wouldn't, because the thing is, in high school, I was under the choice, like fight back or give in. And I chose to give in. It was kind of the only choice I had. If I had this skill set as a teenager, which, boy, if teenagers knew that, some teenagers do know that, but frankly, if you're a parent with teenagers teaching this skill, you'll change their life. And for me, that's the thing about it as well, as being an adult with this skill, is that it's harder to be bullied because somebody's upset and throwing their stuff around. I already know it ain't me.
Yeah.
And that piece alone is one of the gifts that was beyond measure for me, because it gave me a chance to sort of instead of being fight or flight, it was like, what do I choose? And that breathing room alone was a gift that, I mean, my stress level went down, my reactivity went down, it's almost like cutting the puppet strings that we think we have because of other people's feelings. Because so much we spend our time being in reaction to other people, it's like they control the puppet strings. And it's like when you can cut those completely because you are now in charge of your own emotional well-being. Some people pay millions of dollars for that skill set.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And if you think about it, if somebody's bullying you and you think it's all your fault and you're trying to figure out how to fix all your fault, you're never going to be able to fix it because it's not all your fault. It's mostly them. Part of your responsibility, though, if you were starting to grow yourself up, is your reaction. Your reaction is your responsibility. But their action is not you. You know, you didn't cause them to be a bully. You didn't make them, which is what happens with abused people, abused women and men. They're very convinced that it's all their fault. That if they did something differently, if they were a different kind of person, they wouldn't be abused. It's mostly because they're willing to take on all the responsibility.
And that's also because the abuser uses that leverage.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of abusers actually will start to either tell them keep quiet or it'll cost you type thing, or that it's your fault that because you dress this way or you do this thing that I have to do this to you. I mean, it's such a upsetting for me as an external person watching, not in an emotional, unintelligent way, but just going, it's so unfair because we fall victim to this. And one of the things in my grad program in spiritual psychology I went through, one of the things we came back to a lot in one of the principles of teaching was was the principle that how you relate to the issue is the issue.
Mm-hmm.
And to recognize that's the thing is that stuff happens, life happens, people get upset, people do whatever they do. How we respond to that, how we choose to take that in is a different level. We don't have to go, well, that's the way it is and I can't do anything about it. Mm-hmm. So how you relate to the issue is really the issue. And so mm-hmm. the issue is somebody's being upset and frustrated. We can basically relate to the issue in jumping in and going, oh, they're upset, let me counsel them, or let me feel upset too, or let me feel a victim to that. Or we go, what am I being triggered by that? What can I do differently than that? Mm-hmm. What can I be to stay autonomous myself?
Because you're not going to grow jumping into the fray.
No.
Then you're both just in the mug.
Yeah.
So certainly determining where you are emotionally in your grown-upness, your maturity, is how much middle ground you allow yourself. That how much is that person's responsibility? How much is your responsibility? And the part that's your responsibility, and it's not all of it, what can you do to not have it happen next time? What caused it to happen this time? That's a conversation you can have with yourself or a professional. Because as you and I know, people really do have these answers inside of themselves. They just don't know what question to ask, which is why it's so beneficial to ask us, because they go, I love when they go, that's a really good question. I go, I'm thinking about good questions to ask you.
Yeah.
Because that's all they need a lot of the time is, have you looked at it this way? Have you tried this perspective? Or, wow, have you looked at other options? And they stop being all emotional and go, oh, no, well, that might help. I could try that this time and see how it goes. And I love that you bring up that it feels really clunky, because it does, because it's so much more comfortable, not really, but uncomfortably comfortable to keep doing the same thing over and over because we're used to it. And now we're saying, well, we're going to do a little course correcting and you're going to do it differently. It's going to feel really weird.
Right.
And while it's feeling weird, it's going to feel a little better. And then it's going to feel more better. And then it's going to feel a lot better.
Right. Because I think rather than comfort would say familiarity. It's like it's familiar, so you stick to it because we're used to. But one of the things I recommend highly, and I've said, and when someone's upset, one thing to do, often when someone's upset, we will stand there and put up with it because we've been trained to do that.
Yeah.
So one of the options we recommend is that when someone's upset or going through that rant, because a part of us is either trying to fix it or to be to create conflicts. But it's like when somebody's in an altercation in the parking lot about parking spots, it's so tempting to get in there with them. There's something about the drive. Maybe it's just maybe more male thing than female thing. I don't know. I've seen women do it too. Whereas the other choice is to walk away. The other choice is to go, thank you, but no thank you. And to do that, I mean, apart from that, it's a really good pattern interrupt to stop somebody in their tracks because they're looking for someone to fight with. And it's like in martial arts, the whole point of in the martial arts training, it's really about the fact is that if you don't fight back, they can't hurt you because you learn defense. I mean, martial arts truly is a defensive art, not an aggressive art. And what it do is to stop somebody hurting you. So you're basically deflecting them so you're not becoming a combatant. Same is true with arguments and upsets as well. If you don't enter into the conversation, it's like, I love that Monty Python sketch from way back about the guy walks in the room having an argument, wants to make a complaint. The guy says it's a 5-minute argument, a full half hour. It's like, you go in a room to find someone to argue with just to have an argument. But we have people like that in our lives that want to argue all the time.
Yeah.
And really, it's almost now, thankfully, with hindsight, is I can look back at some of those people I was around and just look and go, it's not my game anymore. That's out of that.
Yeah. I have a very fun story that goes along with your Monty Python, that I had a friend who they'd canceled a number of flights. So she was in one of those long rebooking lines.
Oh,
and
yeah.
The person at the desk was going as fast as she could. And about halfway down the line, this guy steps out of line and screams at the agent, "Do you know who I am?" And everything came to a screeching halt. So she just said, "Excuse me," to the person that she was working with. And she leaned over and she looked at the person standing in front of this loudmouth guy and said, I can't do anything right now, but would you turn around and help that man? Because he seems to not know who he is. Everybody broke into applause. He skulked back in line and she went back to work. She didn't engage him. She didn't even say one word to him. She talked to the person in front of him. He was so embarrassed. And I thought, well, that was hot. That's a very emotional, intelligent person under that hard atmosphere. I said, oh, I am going to remember that line forever.
I strongly suspect that some of those counter staff people, the airline people, have had training in this stuff because they have got a way of responding to horrendous abuse and upsets and hurt feelings with such aplomb and gentleness. I mean, frankly, if you want to learn emotional intelligence, hang out with them. They will teach you a thing or two.
Yes, they're very intelligent. So some of the ways I've learned to ask questions and be curious about the people, the men on the other side of the table from me when I'm meeting them early on, is I say, I'm curious about what have been the most fun things at your job. What are the things that you enjoy the most? And then, gosh, what have been the most challenging? And how do you handle that? Especially if it's other employees or their boss. And to hear, is it all the other person? Is it all them? Did they have some dialogues with them? Or did they just go, oh, yeah, it turned out they were just a bully and I quit my job or I changed departments because I don't want to work with a bully anymore. Or I'll ask them about their past relationships. I'll say, this is what I found for my first marriage when I got divorced. And wow, I really took me a long time to figure out what my part was and what his part was. And so with yours, tell me what you think the other person's responsibility was, and then what was yours. And the person who says it was all them, and I don't care what it was. I don't care if they got a diagnosable mental illness. I don't care if they had 20 affairs. I don't care. I mean, I do care, but I don't care if there's not a part that they say, I just kept sticking it out. I kept hoping it would change. Or, wow, I didn't even notice it. It was so bizarre. There were all these red flags and I completely ignored. If they take some responsibility, but if it's only the other person for all these very valid reasons that I listened to before and thought, yeah, okay. But I never thought, oh, I need to find out what they think their responsibility was. And when I started asking that question, the caliber of the kind of person I wanted to date kept showing up more.
It's I mean, said at the beginning about this is that you can really help other people with this. Yeah. Is that when you learn emotional intelligence, your dating qualifications will up level and your dating choices will transform. Yeah. So this is something that's important to have if you want to have a healthy relationship. Because if you're someone who has been in relationships where there was abuse, verbal, emotional, mental, whatever it was, or where the person basically just did not communicate with you in a way that you felt comfortable, this stuff we're talking about here is going to be a lifesaver for you, and it's going to be a transformation experience for your relationship as well. Yeah. You'll choose a different partner from now on because you'll start recognizing that the gifts they bring now are ones that match where you are now are than where you were. And so the skills we're talking about here are different things you do: becoming aware, choosing out so you don't participate, but also becoming aware when you get triggered. Because one of the parts of emotional intelligence is not about how to handle other people. It's like when you get upset. One of the things to talk about emotional intelligence is also, I talk about using ownership language. You said it before about these other people, like taking responsibility. So saying, I noticed that when certain things happen, I get upset. Not you did this to me, which is the victim role, or you shouldn't do that anymore because it's not fun. It's like that's not working either. But you simply say to the other person, and this is again, we got to qualify if the other person is worth it or not. Is that when you keep going on and on with the stories, I get antsy. I want to leave. That's still taking responsibility because you're sharing what you're feeling because of what's happening.
Yeah.
Maybe less judgmental about what the other person is doing because you're putting a little flavor in that. But saying when you tell your stories that go on for a while, I feel uncomfortable. That's a bit healthier, obviously. But also the recognition is the other person may go, oh, now I understand. Like you said, you adjust according to who you're with. That means both sides win, and both sides are learning emotional intelligence, which is great because there's a level of up-leveling that improves the quality of connection. So it's wonderful.
And I love when that happens because when sometimes I'll have asked those questions, they really do stop and go, I never thought about it. And then I wait because now they're going to think about it. At least they're willing to think about, well, what was my part? What do I think helped? I'm like, wow, that's really fun. That's a very fun conversation to have.
It is.
And then, you know, I'm famous for that. I tell that my late husband had been married twice before, and I said, oh my goodness, you know, what do you think was their part? And he goes, oh no, it was all me. It was all me, which I admired
Yeah.
because he wasn't bad mouthing them.
Right.
That was what I appreciated. I mean, he said enough things that I sort of, you know, you always know it's two people.
Yeah.
And when I met them, I certainly saw the other sides. And yet I was very impressed that, you know, he never said negative things about what they did. He talked about what they did,
Mm-hmm.
but he wasn't bad mouthing them. And I was very impressed with that. Because I'd certainly listened to people bad mouth their exes before.
Oh, it's almost one of the one. I want to say this as a coach or a therapist. I think we are definitely in a special place where we hear so much of that upset with their partners.
Yes.
Somebody come to us without awareness of this level of understanding, and so they are in the place of being victimized or being abused or being hurt and wounded, and they don't know how to take responsibility yet.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's the thing with both you and I know is we are gentle with our clients in this area because it's like we can't assume they know stuff they don't know yet.
Yeah.
So having compassion for them and then gently educating them on how to take responsibility for themselves so they can be more able to choose their health emotionally versus being in reaction to what's happening around them.
Mm-hmm.
In a way, the shift is the way I also talk about it, it's like moving from reaction to response. Because the thing is, we have been trained by our culture and by families, especially, and by past partners, to react to what happens, which is totally out of ability to be autonomous. We're totally in victim position.
Yeah.
When we learn to respond, because as you said, you let them think for themselves. When we think for ourselves, and when we just go, hang on a second, how do I want to respond to that? How does that fit? If it fits, okay, but if it doesn't, you're going to go, I need to choose differently how I'm going to respond and change the course of our relationship.
And oh my, if the same thing keeps happening over and over and you change the response finally, they're like, oh, something different happened. Oh, wow.
That's like the fun part.
It's such a revelation. And you and I know it's coming, and they just have to go on faith that just try it. Just try it. It might not work. I'm okay if it doesn't work. We'll come up with another, but just try it. And they come back, they go, oh, it worked. I go, I know. It's kind of amazing. The other thing that I ask people is men, when I'm across the table from them, is I explain that I have my equine therapy thing, that I go 3 days a week and I volunteer for kids and horses. And so what sort of volunteer thing do they do? Or do they have, you know, a cause that they believe in that they donate to? Because that's an important part for me. It feels emotionally mature to feel yourself so much you have things to give to other people, money, time, energy, things. And so it's important for me to have a man who has something. It doesn't have to be the same thing, but has some sort of a giving heart, a way that they want to give to other people in the world. And boy, I've gotten a variety of answers to that. So that's really helpful to me too, for men and women both. If that's an important part to you, if that's the part that is another grown-up part of your emotions, to find out, does somebody else have that? Because it would be hard to be with somebody that didn't have some of that, for me.
Absolutely. No, it's just let's be clear for those in the audience. We both understand this and we're living it ourselves. It's not something we have in theory.
We're both single and dating.
So an experience, yes.
Yeah. Oh yeah. We understand what this is all like and what it's like to date as a person. Because I tell people, I said, I make a real point of leaving my coach hat at home. When I go on a date, I want to just be there as a woman and be there as somebody getting to know a man and finding out, do I want to see them a second time? Does it feel right to me?
Right.
And if I can stay my most authentic person, woman, not a coach, I can judge that better. So it is kind of interesting to go on a date and not be a coach, but I like it better
it's interesting for me, and just to begin sake of transparency, and I'm kind wrapping up, is I do my best to do that.
Yeah.
But boy, sometimes it's hard. Just to be honest. And it is clear that some of these dates I go on, I'm just going to say, like, I know this isn't going to go anywhere, because frankly, I'd be coaching you from the second day onwards, and that wouldn't work for us in dating environment. Doesn't matter how attractive she is.
No,
So,
I've had that. I've had the. So are you open to some feedback? Are you open to some advice? Because it's all just interfering in my brain now, because I know that we're not in the same place, and nobody's better or worse. Nobody's good or bad.
Right.
And then I've had a couple men say no. I go, oh, okay. Would you like some feedback about this date, or what, something you might do a little differently in the future? No. And I asked them later, I said, I'm just curious, what made you say no? Well, I figured you were looking for business. Nope. And I even said, it's too bad other women who aren't coaches couldn't say the same thing. Would you like some feedback? Because you would maybe be a little more open. And one of them said, yeah, he would have, but he still didn't want. I said, okay.
No, I've had that with women too. Although I have had a woman give me feedback unsolicited, without any permission requested. I mean, I see one of my war stories to help other people, going like, this is not what you don't want to do. Yeah. But it cracked me up because the feedback was so clear, and I go, you know what, she's absolutely right. Because what happened was the mismatch. It was through a dating matchmaking service. Uh-huh. The total mismatch was hysterical. I mean, I use this one of my war stories. It's so much fun. It didn't cost me anything ultimately, just a bit of time and money. It wasn't like a massive thing. Yeah. But boy, it's like, this is the thing. It's like, so using it as a teaching moment can be useful, like you said. So anyway.
So yes, lucky people that go out with us, at least we know to ask permission, right?
Indeed, yes.
Because not everybody does. They don't ask permission. They just tell you whether you wanted it or not. And usually you're not really interested.
Yes.
So yes, Cece says we have to stop this interesting conversation. So I hope that you figured out a way to think about your emotional intelligence differently, or the other person's emotional intelligence differently. If you think you need to maybe grow it up a little or mature it a little, you'd like to have the same thing that's not good keep happening over and over, you want to have something better happen, that often is because you need to really grow up, mature your emotional intelligence. So you can talk to Barry or I directly, and the way to reach me is through my website, which is www.theperfectcatch.com. There's a link on there that says what's holding you back from love. You click on that and we can have a conversation together for free and get to the bottom of why you're not finding love right now. You can also send me an email at christine@theperfectcatch.com. And you can see me on social media on Facebook and LinkedIn and Twitter and Pinterest and YouTube and Instagram.
There you go.
I know, I'm getting better. I have to live up to how good Barry is with his. And Barry, please tell people how they can reach you after I stop cracking you up.
That's what I do in the show. It's half the fun. So you want to get some help or get some clarity, or at least understanding. Maybe this topic triggered you to say, I want to get some more clarity and understanding on this. You go to my website, which is barryselby.com, and there's a place on there you click on Let's Have a Conversation. Either get in touch or let's chat, something like that. It's on there. My site's been redone again because the people who did the work vanished. So I'm having some fun now. It's part of the journey. Again, being able to look at this as going interesting rather than going, oh crap, part of the learning. Anyway, so you can go on my website, which is still presentable, has various things on it, and you can look through the menu and check out my stuff. You can drop me an email at barryselby.com. You can check out my YouTube channel, which I've got literally over 1,000 videos on it for all your sort of help stuff. So you find me, which is Barry Selby, on YouTube, on Twitter, on LinkedIn, on Pinterest, and on Clubhouse. And on Instagram, it's The Real Barry Selby, and on Facebook, it's barryselby.author. I think it's everything.
I think so too. I counted yours too on my little fingers.
Thank you.
So we'll be back next week at 1 o'clock Pacific and 4 o'clock Eastern and all the times in between with another fascinating subject to help make you feel more comfortable and confident and successful in your dating. And let's talk about dating on goingsolomedia.com.
We'll see you next week for more.
For now, bye.
See you.